What if every experience, every hardship, every obstacle was given to you, not to break you, but to mold you and strengthen you? What if the center of your suffering was actually the key to ultimate health? And what if your own pain was meant to be the catalyst for your greatest purpose? Welcome to Buddha Belly Life, empowering purpose, mind to microbiome. Hello, and welcome to the Buddha Belly Life podcast. I'm Coach Britt, and today I am joined by Rebecca Weller. She's a health coach and author of A Happier Hour, Up All Day, and the newly released book, Chameleon. She is known especially for her signature program and brand, Sexy Sobriety. So welcome, Bex.
Thank you so much, Brittany. Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. So this is really exciting, you guys. And I think that this is a great time of year to be, not that we're just going to spend the whole 4 episodes talking about alcohol, but I think that drinking is something that needs to be talked about, especially in the coaching community. I know as a lot of us coaches can relate, it's probably like the kryptonite of most of our clients. You take away anything but their alcohol and they're okay, right?
Yes.
Yes. So Bex, first, I have your book, A Happier Hour. It's amazing. I'll tell you some stories about that later, about how I got connected to that. But tell everybody a little bit about your story, how you ended up here, why, with the alcohol piece, and how you ended up in health coaching.
Yeah. So I was quite a shy girl. And so when I discovered in my teen years that alcohol could transform me into this confident, outgoing woman that I thought I wanted to be, I fell in love with that. And, my relationship with alcohol, even from the beginning, it wasn't the healthiest. Like I really would, once I started, I didn't want to stop. And so I would really find myself binge drinking. So even at teenage parties, and then throughout my 20s when I was traveling. And, this continued into my 30s as well. I seemed to find friends who also wanted to binge drink with me, which we can be very adept at doing when we enjoy a certain thing, is finding others who normalize it. And also finding careers that had a lot of money for functions. There were a lot of things happening for team buildings and things that all involved a lot of drinking. And, for 20 years, I kept trying to moderate. I kept trying to set rules around my drinking. Like I would only drink every other day, or I would only drink on Fridays, or I would only drink water in between each drink. And all of these rules, sometimes they worked and sometimes they didn't. And when they did work, I thought, great, I got this under control. I'm sort of drinking like a normal person. And when they didn't work, I would find myself drinking that 1 or probably 5 too many and not remembering the trip home. And I'd spend so many mornings just in this downward spiral of anxiety and shame and nausea. I'd argue with my love. I'd feel cranky and frustrated that I couldn't drink like normal people. And then I'd just sob. I'd have these heartbreaking tears of sadness for getting myself stuck in this mess. In 2014, I was 6 months into my new career as a health coach. I had become intrigued by a vegan lifestyle, and I had left my corporate career of 20 years to embark on this new adventure of like, I want to be a health coach. And just like you were saying, Britt, about, we can take away everything else and we feel fine. And so I was changing my food and I was changing and doing all of these self-love exercises, but I still had this little binge drinking issue that I couldn't seem to shake. And I felt sick with fear at what it would mean if I had to give up alcohol completely, because I was afraid that I would never fit in again, that I would never have or be fun ever again. And this terrified me. But, in 2014, 6 months, as I say, into being a health coach, one day I sat down and I was in a Skype session with one of my beautiful clients, and I looked into the video into her eyes and she said, sometimes when I feel lonely, I drink more. And I said, oh, well, that's okay. And I just, as soon as I said it, I felt horrified because I thought, it's not okay. It's not okay to hide in any addictive habit or substance, to hide what's going on with us. Like, we need to feel these emotions. And that was, one big turning point where I started to feel like, hang on a second, my life is not reconciling. I say that I want to be a health coach, that I want to do all these things. And I find that path of life so attractive. And yet I'm still having this foot in my old life where I'm like, but I'm the life of the party and I'm a big drinker and I'm always first at the bar. And who would I be if I wasn't that person anymore? I was also in a new relationship, just to add to the add to the pressure, and my love was not happy with my drinking at all. And this was a real conflict as well, because he didn't see what the big attraction was with alcohol drinking, which, it's a miracle that we ended up together in the first place. But, this, seeing my behavior through his eyes as well, like, I started to see, okay, this is not normal. Just because I've surrounded myself with other people who like to do this as well doesn't mean that it's kind of the normal or the thing that I want to do. And I was on the precipice of turning 40, and I was like, I don't want to go into a new decade like this. Like, I want to really sort this out. I didn't want to feel so stupid of having something so silly holding me back. I didn't want to feel upset if I couldn't have a drink on Friday nights. I didn't want to keep falling into the binge drinking trap. I was sick of the anxiety, the shame, the horrific hangovers that were slowing me down and keeping me from rocking my passions. I really wanted freedom. I wanted to feel playful, with confidence that was authentically me, not poured from a bottle. I wanted deeper connections, less anxiety, more space, more love, more potential. I really wanted a big transformation. And so I discovered these sobriety blogs that led me down the rabbit hole of reading sobriety books and all this information that inspired me and made me think, what if I approached my sobriety as an experiment, the same way that I had approached when I went gluten-free, when I went dairy-free, when I started seeing how I could bring down my sugar levels, all of this, rather than scaring myself and saying, that's it forever, you're never going to have a croissant again. Instead, I was like, let me just experiment with this and see if I feel better. And if I feel better, maybe I'll want to keep going. And so I did the same with sobriety. I was like, let me just try a 3-month experiment and let me see, do I feel better? Like, is this something that makes my life better? I didn't see how it could because I'd never experienced anything like it or knew anyone who had, but I was curious. And through doing this experiment, I not only discovered all of this potential and this transformation that I was really hoping for, but I discovered who I really am. And I became so inspired by this that I wanted to share my journey with other women so that they could experience it for themselves. I wanted to spread the word, like, seriously, life can be better without alcohol. I know I didn't believe it either, but it's true. And this inspired me to create Sexy Sobriety in late 2014. And ever since, I've been supporting and helping thousands of women from around the world to conduct their own experiments and find out what I did.
Amazing. And I'm familiar with your story, so I can relate. And you probably have a combination of people. I would assume at least 3 types of people. One are the people that may or may not have an issue with alcohol, but they're not ready to even face it. So they feel they feel bad for you. Like, they're like, oh, is my drinking going to bother you? Like, they feel weird. Then you have the people who are like, ugh, like you're trying to steal their puppy or something, right? Like, just because you don't drink, they're like, you're out to take my puppy, and you're like, hey, like, can I just, especially if you're an empath, if you are at all an empath, and there's a chance you might be because you're a health coach, you pick up on that and you're like, oh no, let me make you feel better about my sobriety.
Exactly.
And then thirdly, you have the people who are like, oh my gosh, you're speaking my language. And maybe they're even the people who are like, I haven't had a really great place to talk about this. How many of us? So I was a binge drinker. I was never a frequent drinker. I was a anxiety suffering child. And it was in my teens that I discovered in the pits of pretty much a nervous breakdown where I was just being bombarded with a combination of anxiety and depression that I'd never experienced. I mean, so severe. It was a full nervous breakdown. And I went somewhere with some friends for something. They talked me out of the house, and this was already so hard for me. And we went to a house and someone handed me a beer. And I drank it, and it lifted something off me in that moment that didn't even know how I was ever going to get through. I mean, it was so bad. And so that started quite an association for me personally with anxiety. So I'm a very social person, but I get really overstimulated in crowded situations. If I feel boxed in, I mean, there's lots of people, I mean, whatever. And alcohol was the thing. So if I was going to a concert or I was going somewhere or I was depressed and everything, that's what we did on the weekends. We didn't have anything to do. We looked for the house that had the party. We looked for the older friends. We had the older guy friends that could buy us alcohol, that could do something. We drank. And there's no point in a drink when I started drinking. We were underage drinking and we're going for gold tonight. You know what I mean? And then you experience like the blackout moments and the poor decision making, even before maybe you're old enough to experience a hangover. And the aftermath of this stuff, I feel like it carries on into adulthood. And I've always been somebody who is pretty health conscious. And it never helped my anxiety or depression. In the long run, it exacerbated it. It made it much worse. So I've never been a frequent drinker. But when I could have a drink maybe once a month or once every other month, because I had like partners that didn't really drink much, which was probably a blessing. But once it would hit your lips, I could never be somebody who could have just one or even two most of the time. You go for that. You have to go for that feeling or that place. And once you hit that feeling, I call it a vacation in a bottle, where you're just like, like this is my one place. I don't ever want to leave this place. Like keep it coming. And so I relate so much because I've had multiple times of putting it away. And for the better part of 2 years, my partner and I haven't drank because after some divorce and stuff, I'm remarried, and my husband now is the same spirit animal as me. I had always had an opposite on the other side of me, and then I had somebody who was the same as me, and we were like, oh crap, this is not good. And we would just have the funnest time together, and then we would just die after that. And a hair of the dog turns into 3 days of alcohol tapering off just to live through the one choice. So I am the person who gets what you're talking about and feels really stoked to be able to connect on that level.
Right. And I love how you put it there about taking away the puppy. That's brilliant.
That's what
You're so right. Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And just those blackouts, I think, were the most horrifying for me, because it's that horror of not knowing and seeing, like, I used to hide from certain friends and stuff because I didn't want to see them, because I was like, what did I do? I don't remember, even getting home, or did they take me home? I don't remember. And so I would just be so scared of what they would tell me that I had said or done that I would avoid them. And so, there's a lot of hiding in drinking as well. There's hiding from ourselves and denial, but there's also a lot of hiding from other people and not being honest in our relationships.
Do you have a desire for fulfillment? Does helping people tap into their own health mentally, emotionally, and physically fire you up? Do you believe in the impact of the gut microbiome on overall wellness? You may be an HWCA coach. For more info on our cutting-edge health coach trainings, visit hwcacoach.com. Here's one thing. Here's the thing that I've noticed is do you feel like, I don't know how I think about this. Do you think that there's a double standard from men to women when it comes to over drinking and being drunk?
Yes.
Do you feel like there's a double standard?
Yes.
Because I feel like I watch I watch men at times in certain environments and stuff. And I do a lot in the business world, entrepreneurial world. And, people that are really successful and doing a lot of things, social events and whatnot. And I feel like the men can get just schnockered and they're not judged, but as they would judge a woman.
Yes.
Like if I were to look like that in my work environments, even if we have a similar work environment, I would be mortified. I would feel shame, and it would be rightfully so, because people would be very hard on me because of that.
Yes, definitely. My love was just talking about, because we've got a wedding to go to, and we were talking about like a couple of female friends who were coming, and they felt sort of nervous about coming by themselves because they don't have a partner at the moment. And Dom said, there's such a different standard there as well of like, if a guy goes to a wedding stag or single, everyone's like, oh yeah, you're going to run amok. Which of the bridesmaids are you going to hook up with? La la la. If a woman goes, it's like, oh dear, couldn't you get a date? That's really sad. And it's just such this double standard. It's the same with drinking. I think often we, as a society, will think, it's definitely this culture that we're in where there's victim blaming as well, where it's like, oh, the woman has put herself into a scary situation. She's made herself vulnerable, and I think that's what it's underneath a lot of the judgment when we see drunk women. But it's definitely this sort of like acceptance of the lad culture and looking down upon women who are doing the same thing. And this is when I was in the corporate world. It was one of the things that us as women, we thought we were being more respected by drinking as much as the guys did. And that was definitely like a driving force of like, yeah, we can drink for drink. Like, watch me do it, even though I'm half your size. And when I look back now, I'm like, yeah, I mean, I talk in actually my most recent book, Chameleon, I talked about one time where I went out on Friday night with work friends and I didn't remember getting home or the rest of the night. And so I had one of those weekends where all weekend long you're just in turmoil of like, I don't want to think about what I might have done or didn't do, and I don't want to go to work on Monday. And I was just in this state of heightened anxiety where I couldn't stand myself. I couldn't stand the thoughts in my own head. I couldn't stand the thought of like what I'm going to do when I go in on Monday. And my stomach was lurching on the training on Monday morning. And I walked in and, half a dozen of my colleagues stood up and just did this slow clap like this. And I was just mortified, absolutely mortified. I didn't know whether to pee my pants or cry or throw up or pass out. I was just like, my body was hot and cold and just so confused. And it was just such a horrible moment where I'm like, would they have done that to another guy colleague? Probably, but it would have been more in the way of like, joking of like, yeah, well done, mate. You really sort of took it to a new level. But when it was a woman, and especially because I always worked in male-dominated industries, and this was in Swiss banking at the time, and so to there as well, like I just felt like, oh my God, I didn't want to be like singled out for that reason.
No, and you've worked so hard to be taken seriously.
Exactly.
You're like, great. Someone probably saw my butt. And I don't know why they're clapping at me.
Why the slow clap? And to this day, I don't know.
You're going to get an email after this podcast. You're going to be like, well, I feel like enough time has passed back. This is why we were slow. We saw your butt.
Why. It's about time you knew.
And I love that you talk about all the rules that we give ourselves. Like, I love that we're like, okay, this is going to be different. Like, here's a few of my favorite. It's tequila. It's tequila. If I have tequila, no, it's dark liquor. If I drink only beer, it's going to be fine. Red wine, not if it's white wine. It can't be white. I can't mix anything. If I mix anything, I'm like, beer before liquor before beer. It's the order we do it. It's how much water. I didn't eat all day. Like all these things are factors, but the real truth of it is like you got wasted. You just got really drunk.
Oh my gosh, yes. And for me, it was always like wine and champagne because they were my favorites and because they're so strong. I was like, as long as I drink sort of vodka and soda water, that'll be fine. Like I'll be absolutely fine. But then I'd go to a function that only had wine or champagne. So I'd be like, oh, well, tomorrow I'll do just just the vodkas.
Yes, totally. And so when you see, and I think it's good to be able to laugh about things now, where it gets destructive. And I think I can kind of remember being there. And I know a lot of people who I see are there too, that, we find a way to kind of like minimize it a week or so later. It's like once the hangover wears off and we don't feel physically like crap and our brain isn't as foggy and we're not as depressed and all this stuff, we've kind of got our energy back a little bit. We can get an intentional amnesia of just how bad it was so that we just repeat the process, right? Mm-hmm. And it's nice to be on the end of something when you're past something. Like I say the better part of 2 years because my husband and I had a moment, early in the summer and stuff where it had been so long. And I think this is what a lot of people do. It had been so long. You can have a glass of champagne at this really special event, or two, and you're fine. And maybe you are fine that time. And maybe you're fine another time. And then you have a third night that you're not fine and you didn't mean to drink that much. And, we have a lot of kids and stuff. So for us, it's like, we don't want to do it around them. And there's obviously, holds us back from everything in life, our businesses, our children, our health, each other. And it just is this roller coaster. But when you actually put it away and you start moving past anything, you can look back on it. It's the only thing for me that has ever freed the shame and the guilt.
Yes.
Is when you really fully heal from something. What do you think about that?
Yeah,
I'm sure you agree with that.
I totally agree. Yes. Gosh, yes. I just kept being stuck in this cycle of going round and round and round again and not knowing how to get out of it. And, when I first came across these blogs and books that talked about life is better sober, I was like, but how? Like, how would that even be possible? And so, I think it's one of those things where often you can't believe it until you experience it for yourself and you start to see like, oh, wow, this is so peaceful. I wake up on the weekends. I never have to worry about what I did. I never have to check if I wrote anything stupid on Facebook. I never have to. Oh,
that's the best. Text, you go through your text, but you have a checklist in the morning. Exactly. You're like, who did I text? What did I post? Like my teenage years, we didn't have internet we didn't have a phone with internet on it. We didn't have to worry about capturing the moments that you can now.
That's right. Like checking your phone for evidence, right? Or, calling friends to apologize. And, none of that. Life's so peaceful without that. And so much heart space and head space just opens up when you're not stuck in this cycle of guilt and shame and remorse and regret. Suddenly you are able to look forward more instead of constantly looking back. And, I look forward short term to like, what's the next party? That's sort of thing. When's the next event that we can get carried away? But you then open up this space to look further ahead with like, what do I want for my life? Like, what could my life look like? Suddenly there's all this energy that's available to you that you weren't sort of throwing back into that same cycle. And I love that ability to break free and to move to a new level.
Thank you for joining us for another empowering episode of Buddha Belly Life. For more information on gut health and mindset resources, visit buddhabellylife.com. And remember, heal yourself and then empower others to do the same.